Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to be here at the RSA, and thank you very much for coming. 12 months ago, the Prime Minister formed her government and created my new department, the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. And the mission to develop a modern industrial strategy was a requirement to look ahead, to put in place the policies and institutions that will help Britain earn a prosperous living in the future, to ensure that we have an economy that works for everyone. We start from a position of strength. Britain is home to some of the world's most successful businesses, and more people are employed than at any time in our history. But to project those strengths into the future requires looking in an open and collaborative way at how we can not only respond to the new technological opportunities, but to ensure that everyone in Britain and every part of Britain is achieving their full potential. Alongside education and the family, work is how most people develop and achieve that potential. And so the work of Matthew Taylor and his panel members into how we can be a country that offers good work to all our citizens is a hugely important contribution to our modern industrial strategy. Matthew is going to summarise the findings and recommendations of his report, and then the Prime Minister will give her initial response. So in the home of Matthew's RSA, I'll hand over now to Matthew Taylor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Greg. Well, welcome to the RSA. Given our venue, I ought to start by thanking this society for allowing me to take on this role while still being Chief Executive. Today marks the end of the review, but the RSA will continue to be a leading voice in debates about the future of work. Thank you, Prime Minister, for giving me the honour of leading this review, for the support of your team throughout, and for joining me today to launch our report. I should also thank our other review team members, Greg Marsh, Diane Nicol, who's here, and Paul Broadbent. Their wisdom and insights were invaluable, and thank you also to the hard-working, expert and patient Secretariat in Bays. But most of all, I want to thank the hundreds, indeed thousands of people who engaged with us across the length and breadth of the UK at public events, conferences, round tables, and simply by submitting ideas, opinions and powerful accounts of their first-hand experiences of work. The starting point for our review is the strength of our labour market and of the key features of our system of employment regulation, what we refer to in the report as the British way. Record levels of employment, low levels of unemployment, high levels of voluntary flexibility, earnings now growing fastest amongst the lowest paid. These facts provide a very positive backdrop, one that would be envied in many other advanced economies, the backdrop for us to consider the question of how to improve the quality of work. So with this success in mind, let me make clear that the review team thinks flexibility is a good thing. In fact, we need more of it. Let me underline that getting a job is still the best way out of poverty and the best path to opportunity. And let me reassure firms and organisations that good employers have absolutely nothing to fear from our proposals. Indeed, we explicitly say that what is sometimes called the employment wedge, the costs of taking someone on as an employee, is already big and should not be bigger. So our national performance on the quantity of work is strong. But quantity alone is not enough for a thriving economy and for a fair society. So we believe now is the time to complement that commitment to creating jobs with the goal of creating better jobs. The review calls on the government to adopt the ambition that all work should be fair and decent, with scope for fulfilment and development. Why do we think good work matters? Because, despite the impact of the national living wage and tax credits, there will always be people who are in work but finding it hard to make ends meet. Our social contract with those people should include dignity at work and the realistic scope to progress in the labour market. Because bad work, insecure, exploitative, controlling, is bad for health and well-being, something that generates costs for vulnerable individuals, but also for wider society. Because, as many business leaders recognise, indeed Charlie Mayfield is unveiling a report today about this very issue, low-quality work and weak management is implicated in our productivity challenge. improving the quality of work is an important part of our productivity strategy. And because technology, like robotics and machine learning, is going to have a big impact on jobs and the tasks that make up those jobs. And as we seize these technological opportunities, as we must, we should do so with the aim of making working lives better, taking away the drudgery, and leaving the human contact and creativity that machines can't provide. I'm pleased that we're joined today by staff and pupils from Holyhead and RSA Academy in Birmingham. We must aim for those pupils to be the beneficiaries of technological change, not its victims. And finally, because if we want citizens who are engaged, responsible, active, who, to coin a phrase, take back control, we should encourage those same virtues in the workplace. Our idea of what it is to be a respected citizen should not stop at the office or factory door. So in our review, we call for a more concerted and determined approach to improving the quality of work in our economy. Our proposals include a new role for the Low Pay Commission, exploring how to improve quality and progression in sectors with a high proportion of low-paid workers, such as social care and hospitality. A national framework for employability skills, so we can develop the kind of transferable capabilities that can be acquired in formal education, but also informal education and on-the-job learning. A proposal that city mayors and combined authorities take the lead in working with employers and public agencies to promote health and well-being at work, making it much easier for employees to access rights to independent representation at work, to information and to consultation. But if the ambition for good work is sincere, we need also to address those factors which make that more difficult. And one of those factors is a lack of clarity. To increase clarity for business and for workers, we propose primary legislation to redefine the boundary between self-employment and worker status, and we suggest that we might change the name of worker to dependent contractor, moving towards aligning the categories used in tax regulation and employment regulation, and we argue that the employment status boundary should be defined as it is in the tax boundary in terms primarily of the level of control and supervision experienced by individuals. And we need to tackle exploitation and the risk of exploitation. Of all the issues that were raised with us as we went around the country, the one that came through most strongly was what the report calls one-sided flexibility. Now, two-way flexibility is great. It can enable people to work in the way they want, when they want, across their life cycle. Indeed, this is why we've gone to some lengths to suggest a way to enable platform-based models to continue to offer that flexibility, even if the individuals they engage are reclassified as workers. One-sided flexibility is where employers seek to transfer all risk onto the shoulder of workers in ways which make people more insecure and makes their lives harder to manage. It's the people told to be ready for work or travelling to work, only to be told none is available. It's the people who've spent years working for a company on 0-hours contracts, but who, without a guarantee of hours from week to week, can't get a mortgage or a loan. It's the people who feel that if they ever raise legitimate concerns about their treatment, they will simply be denied the hours that they so desperately need. It's these issues that have led us to ask the Low Pay Commission to explore the idea of a higher minimum wage level for those hours which people are asked to work but which are not guaranteed to them. It's also why we have called for a right for people to request fixed hours and permanent contracts, along with a requirement that companies disclose how they have responded to such requests. There's nothing wrong with 0 and low hours contracts, but they should be a means to two-way flexibility, not a lazy way for those with market power to dump risk on those who lack that power. Finally, we also take seriously the challenge of enforcement. Too often people don't enforce their rights because they don't know they have them. So among our proposals, we suggest a new requirement that all employees and workers should be given essential information about their status, terms and conditions on day one of their employment. We believe this will mean that many workers for the first time will be able to take up rights to holiday and sick pay. We ask HMRC to explore extending their enforcement role for the minimum wage to other core rights, such as holiday and sick pay. And we have proposals to make it easier for people to find out and enforce their employment status. The review is now complete. It falls to the Prime Minister, the Government and Parliament to decide how to respond to our recommendations. In recent days, I've spoken about our work to senior politicians in different parties. I've talked with trade unionists and business leaders. I've engaged entrepreneurs and campaigners. Everyone will have their own view, and it's already clear that no one will agree with every word of our report. But my hope is that in responding to our proposals, those people and the interests they represent can focus primarily on what we agree about. In these challenging times, I sense the public would value a sign that we can put aside our differences and focus on a shared commitment to better working lives for our fellow citizens. From time to time, people have asked me what, as chair of the review, I would see as success. Now, I'd be proud to see our recommendations enacted. I'd be delighted if our strategic proposals were fully debated, but more than anything, I hope this review will be seen as marking the point at which good work becomes an accepted and widely supported national goal. If the government and the public come to recognise the vital importance of good work to social justice, to economic dynamism, and to civic engagement, then the efforts of the review team and all who have supported us will have been richly rewarded. Thank you. Thank you. I'll be happy to take questions later on in our session, but as I mentioned earlier on, I'm very grateful to the Prime Minister for asking me to carry out this review. I hope, Prime Minister, that it will meet with expectations. And of course, it now falls for you to decide how we take the recommendations forward, and we'll be delighted to hear your thoughts. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming the Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Matthew. A year ago, I stood outside Downing Street for the first time as Prime Minister, and I set out the defining characteristics of the government I was determined to lead. A clear understanding that the EU referendum result was not just a vote to leave the European Union, but a deeper and more profound call for change across our country. A belief that at the heart of that change must lie a commitment to greater fairness in our country as we tackle the injustices and vested interests that threaten to hold us back and make Britain a country that works for everyone, not just a privileged few. And a determination to address difficult issues and take big decisions in the long-term interests of Britain so that we emerge from this period of great national change stronger and better able to seize the opportunities ahead as we fulfil the promise of Brexit together. And though the result of last month's general election was not what I wanted, those defining beliefs remain. My commitment to change in Britain is undimmed. My belief in the potential of the British people and what we can achieve together as a nation remains steadfast. And the determination I have to get to grips with the challenges posed by a changing world never more sure. I'm convinced that the path that I set out in my first speech outside Number 10, and upon which we have set ourselves as a government, remains the right one. It will lead to the stronger, fairer Britain that we need. It will deliver the change people want. It will ensure we make the most of this opportunity to ask ourselves what kind of country we want to be, and to answer that question with confidence, optimism, and hope. And that is why I'm so grateful to Matthew for the report that he is publishing today, because the issues it confronts go right to the heart of this government's agenda and right to the heart of our values as a people. The nature of employment is central both to our national economic success, but also to the lives we all lead. From the end of our childhoods until the years of retirement, if we don't win the national lottery jackpot, the vast majority of us will expect to devote at least half of our waking hours on most days of the week to work. A good job can be a genuine vocation, providing intellectual and personal fulfillment, as well as economic security. With good work can come dignity and a sense of self-worth. It can promote good mental and physical health and emotional well-being. And our motivations for going out to work are deeply personal. It's how we provide for ourselves and our families. It's how we pay the mortgage or the rent to keep a roof over our heads, how we put food on the table and provide for our old age. And as Matthew says in his report, work is a pathway out of poverty. Think of the household where a mum or dad, a brother or sister or a grandchild moves into employment. They can gain the security of a regular wage, the opportunity to plan for the future. A child can grow up seeing a parent go out to work every day and inwardly form the expectation that they will do the same. Imagine that child a few years later, taking the step from education into employment and starting her working life on the front foot. She's setting herself on the road to a fulfilling career and a happier life. Imagine her father, who might have been unemployed for years, who might have given up all hope of working again, getting a job thanks to the tailored support of universal credit. He will have helped himself, his family, and the whole country. That is the real value of work, and we should never lose sight of it. At the same time, we will always back enterprising small and medium-sized business owners. They are people who take risks with their own economic security in order to start and grow a business, contribute to our national success, and provide employment to other people. They don't play it safe. They put faith in their talent and hard work and take a chance. When they succeed, we all benefit. So as an aspiration becomes reality, as an idea becomes an invoice, we will back those who dare to dream and who dare to think big. And my message to them is clear and unequivocal. We respect the work you do, and we will always be on your side when you do the right thing. And our task, informed by the work of Matthew and his team, is to make sure that the high standards of our best employers become the benchmark against which all employers are judged. As the world of work changes, our practices and laws must properly reflect and accommodate those changes, because good work is in the interests of good business. We know that flexible working opportunities help to ensure that employers don't miss out on the talents and skills of those who would otherwise be unable to fit with the regular 9 to 5. That investment in learning and progression for staff is not just valuable for employees, but also helps to boost productivity. If we are to deliver our vision for Britain as a high-wage, high-skill economy, then we know that we have to invest in good work. As a Conservative government, we will always be on the side of hard workers and good employers. And just look at our record to date. We've introduced for the first time a national living wage, giving 1.5 million workers the fastest pay rise in 20 years. We've created a new director for labour market enforcement to stamp out exploitation and help protect workers' rights. We've banned exclusivity clauses in zero-hours contracts to ensure that people always have the freedom to take on other work. We've extended the right to flexible working and introduced shared parental leave, so both parents can spend time with their children in those important early months, but also carry on with their careers. We've worked with businesses to ensure there are more women on boards than ever before, and are working with them again to take further steps to improve corporate governance. All the while, at the same time, the number of people in work is up by 2.9 million. The unemployment rate is the lowest it has been since 1975. And there are now over 800,000 fewer workless households since 2010, a reduction of 21%. Youth unemployment is down 375,000 since 2010, and long-term youth unemployment has halved. That is the record of this government, and a record of which I am proud. And it's important to remember that almost 3/4 of the rise in employment over the last 7 years has been in full-time jobs, and 2/3 of the jobs created since 2010 have been permanent positions. But we do know that experiences of work and employment are changing, and that driven by technology, they will go on changing in the years ahead. For many, the traditional model of a full-time job with one employer is still the norm. But for others, newer and more flexible forms of work are increasingly common. And that's why I commissioned Matthew to produce this report for the government. And the result is a substantial piece of work. And I want to thank Matthew and his fellow panel members for producing it. They've travelled up and down the country, as you've heard from Matthew, They've spoken at length to workers and businesses to get an informed picture, and their work will make a major contribution to the much-needed public debate on this issue. And what's clear from Matthew's report is that our response to the changing world of work cannot be to try to stop the clock. Much of our success is built on the fact that we're an open, innovative economy, and we must remain that way. Indeed, one of the key findings of Matthew's report is that there's a great deal of good in the British way, the model of employment we have here in Great Britain. Its flexibility and responsiveness, alongside clear and consistent protections for employees and workers, are all sources of strength. And in responding to changes in the labour market, we must do nothing which weakens them. But as the report also highlights, that flexibility cannot be one-sided, with workers shouldering the requirement to be available for work at very short notice without any guarantee that work will actually be available or that they will be rewarded for their flexibility. So while Matthew's report is clear that many workers value the flexibility that zero-hours contracts offer them, and that banning such contracts altogether would harm more people than it would help, it's important that we continue to ensure that employers do not use these contracts to exploit people. And in other areas, we may need to look again at where the law has not kept up with modern working practices, like for those of us who make use of platform working. But just as often, it can be a case of making sure that existing laws are properly understood and enforced. For example, employing unpaid interns as workers to avoid paying the national minimum wage is illegal, but we need to make sure that employers and interns alike are clear on the rules. And I absolutely share Matthew's ambition that all work should be fair and decent, with scope for development and fulfilment. As Matthew says, good work and plentiful work can and should go together. The quantity of jobs remains vital, but quality matters too. Because work is such a central aspect of most of our lives, we should also care about how people are treated when they are at work, whether they feel safe and secure, with the opportunity to get on and make progress. So we will study this report's contents carefully over the summer and respond in detail later in the year. But in the meantime, let me set out some of the key principles which will guide us as we act to make employment fairer and more secure. And when it comes to taking action, I'm determined that we do so in a fair way, fair to all workers and fair to businesses too. We'll build on the strengths of our labour market, what Matthew calls the British way. While avoiding overbearing regulation, we will make sure people have the rights and protections they need. That means building on our high employment rate and low unemployment rate, and continuing to strive for full employment. It means retaining the flexibility that people value, and recognising that most employers treat their staff not just fairly, but well. It means remaining a home to innovation, new ideas, and new business models, and recognising the risks and difficulties which those striving to build their own businesses face, not just on day one, but every day. But it also means finding the right balance of rights and responsibilities, flexibilities and protections. For business, it means taking their responsibilities seriously and listening to their employees. For government, it means increasing the national living wage so that people who are on the lowest pay see their wages go up as the economy strengthens, as well as supporting people to get into work and to make progress in their careers. For us all, it means supporting people to live fuller working lives and helping employers to retain the valuable skills and experience of older workers. And because disability or a health condition should never dictate the path a person is able to take in their working life, it means helping everyone to progress in work, to get on, and to go as far as their talents will take them. It will take time and a broad public debate to determine exactly the right action to take to ensure that we're living by all of these principles, and we will listen to all contributions to that debate. But I'm clear that this government will act to ensure that the interests of employees on traditional contracts, the self-employed, and those working in the gig economy are all properly protected. This report will provide the stimulus for that work across the range of employment types. When I commissioned this report, I led a majority government in the House of Commons, and the reality I now face as Prime Minister is rather different. In this new context, it will be even more important to make the case for our policies and our values, and to win the battle of ideas, both in Parliament as well as in the country. So I say to the other parties in the House of Commons, read this report, engage with the difficult issues it raises, come forward with your own views and ideas about how we can tackle these challenges as a country. We may not agree on everything, but through debate and discussion, the hallmarks of our parliamentary democracy, ideas can be clarified and improved, and a better way forward found. And it's in that spirit that we will take this agenda forward in the months ahead. And this new context presents us as a government with a wider choice. At this critical time in our history, we can either be timid or we can be bold. We can play it safe or we can strike out with renewed courage and vigour, making the case for our ideas and values and challenging our opponents to contribute, not just to criticise. I think this country needs a government that is prepared to take the bold action necessary to secure a better future for Britain, and we are determined to be that government. In everything we do, we will act with an unshakable sense of purpose to build the better, fairer Britain which we all want to see. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. So, as is the RSA way in this room, we have time for a few questions. I'll start with one of my colleagues, if that isn't too much of a fix. No.
Anthony Painter from the RSA. Prime Minister, you've focused previously on the just about managing. How do you see the Taylor Review as contributing to that agenda? And are there other proposals that your government might be looking to bring forward in the next few months to develop the agenda further?
Yes. Well, if you think back to the first time that I sort of referred to people who were finding day-to-day life often a struggle and just about managing. It was in that speech I gave outside Number 10 when I first became Prime Minister. And one of the elements that I referred to then was those people who have a job but don't have job security. And I think some of the issues that Matthew has raised in this report strike right at the heart of that agenda. It's about ensuring that we can develop for people that greater job security, but also that, as Matthew's been talking, that quality of work, that good work, which will ensure that they're not just in a job, but actually able to see that progression. And one of the elements that I'm very keen on as we go further forward, I used the phrase in this speech about people being able to go as far as their talents will take them. I think that's an important challenge for us as a government to ensure that what we're also doing is providing people with the education and the skills training which enables them to take on the new jobs of the future. Because the world of work is changing and is going to continue to change. It's a big challenge that we face. We need to prepare people for that change and take that forward as well, so that people are genuinely able to see that progression in their work.
Yep. There. Second row.
Thank you. Prime Minister Neil Carberry from the CBI and also a member of the Law Pay Commission. Both you and Matthew talked about the importance of law, but also the importance of practice. And in your speech, you referred to the high expectations we have of our best companies and how we can spread those. That goes to something that I think we at the CBI have thought for a long time, which is this is about employee relations as well as about just the law. What can we collectively do together to drive that?
Well, I think you've made a very important point, Neil, which is that it is a lot of this is about attitudes, it's about the approach that is taken. And in good companies with those good employee relations, actually it's not just about what is good for those employees. It actually is good for the whole company, it's good for the business. And if it's good for the business, it's good for our economy. And those good employee relations, good for our society as well. So I think what we need to do is to look at, as Matthew referred to look at and work is being done by Charlie Mayfield and others in looking at this. What is it about some companies that enables them to have that good employee relations? How can we generate those, recognise those principles and concepts and generate more interest in those and other employees looking at those? Because you're right, of course you need a framework of law, but legislation isn't the answer to everything. And often it's about how people then interpret that law. And as I referred to in terms of some of the issues, what we see, and the reason why we need a Director of Labour Market Enforcement is to make sure that people are actually abiding by the law that has been set. But we need to go further than that. It's about employers recognising that the relationship with their employees it's about productivity, it's about a better business, and that's good for us all.
And I hope that one of the more important recommendations that we make is to significantly lower the threshold that is required for employees to request rights to independent representation, information and consultation. I think the CBI have been supportive of that idea, and I think that could make a real difference in the workplace. Yeah.
Thank you. Hi, Philippa Wilson. I'm trustee of the RSA and entrepreneur. You mentioned, Prime Minister, that fairness was one of the key things you were looking for from this report, and fairness in society. And I actually wanted to ask Matthew how he felt the proposals within this review could help address the gender pay gap and the fact that there's still a 9% discrepancy between men and women on a salary perspective.
So we have, I think the first thing to say is flexibility is, generally speaking, something which is particularly valued by women. It's particularly valued by people who have caring responsibilities. We also address in the report issues around the danger, we heard quite a lot of this, about discrimination towards women who are pregnant, who've had children, who are workers rather than employees. Employee protection is quite strong, but the protection isn't so strong for workers. And we've called for that to be looked at, and we've said very clearly that if we don't see an improvement, and at the moment surveys find quite high levels of women talking about being discriminated against if they are, as I say, workers, if that isn't changed, we've said the government needs to look at legislating to improve the protection offered to women. So I think that is a very important element of our report. Yeah.
Hi there, Remy Antonio Robinson, sixth form student at one of the RSA schools. So I heard the Prime Minister talking about a changing world and a stronger Britain. However, do you believe that your government is doing enough to ensure that those of ethnic minorities are entering more professional jobs?
Don't get easy questions from RSA pupils.
Absolutely, no, and it is a very valid question. It's an important question, and we have, in a number of areas, we're encouraging that greater diversity of employees. There's work being done, for example, in the legal profession to try to ensure that we see a greater diversity of people from greater diversity of backgrounds coming forward. What is underpinning what I absolutely passionately believe as a government, and this is why I referred earlier to the importance of education and making sure that people have the skills to take on jobs, is that we want a society in this country where it doesn't matter where you come from or what your background is. It's about you and your talents and your willingness to work hard that determine how far you go. Now, in order to do that, that's about, if you make like ensuring people have that skills and those education to go forward, but it's also about making sure that professions and others are open to recognising the benefits of recognising talent and not looking at background of an individual. And I've been involved in the political world in trying to ensure that, for example, we get more women into Parliament, which I'm pleased to say that we now have. And I always say, and I think the same has been important for business as well, that in politics or in business, if you have people from a greater diversity of backgrounds involved in your politics or your business making decisions, you'll get better decisions than if you have people just from the same sort of background making those decisions. So we've got a way to go, but we have set some challenges to certain areas of society to increase the diversity of their workforce, so that they are actively recruiting people from different backgrounds, and particularly from BME backgrounds.
I think in terms of the report, a couple of important measures are, as the Prime Minister said, we will reassert the fact that unpaid internships, which are a big problem in terms of social mobility, are not legal. And also there's a strong emphasis on employability, so that we can come to be better at recognising not just formal education, but also informal learning, and also the roles that people play as volunteers and carers, because they all contribute to someone's capacity to be a good worker. Now, Robert.
Prime Minister, sort of slightly flippantly perhaps, recent events in your own very unlikely. Recent events in your own life, do you think they've made you slightly more sympathetic to insecure employment? But more germanely, you would agree that education is perhaps the biggest driver of high-quality employment. The School Teachers Review Board said yesterday there was a serious risk of a shortage of high-quality teachers because of the 1% pay cap. Actually, ITV has done an investigation which shows serious shortages of nurses and other medical staff as a result of the pay cap. Do you see the risk that an extension of the pay cap will do damage to the fabric of the country? And Matthew, there's very little in your report about the role of trade unions. McKinsey even say that living standards, particularly in Germany and Northern Europe, are higher because of the greater role of trade unions. Why have you not made recommendations in that area?
Well, first of all, Robert, as we look ahead in terms of the issue of public sector pay, we will do what we continue to do, what we have always done as a government, which is to say that what we need to do is balance the being fair to public sector workers with the need to protect jobs and being fair to those who are paying for public sector, which, as we know, is a taxpayer. So we look at that balance and we continue to assess that balance, and that's what we will continue to do.
On the trade union point, I'm a great fan of trade unions, not something which appears to be reciprocated from what I'm hearing this morning, but there's two or three things. So first of all, I think it's important that we're asking the Low Pay Commission to take on a much bigger role, because that's a tripartite body and the trade unions are strongly represented on that. Secondly, I think our steps to make it much easier for people to have independent representation. I think if trade unions are progressive and thoughtful, they'll realise that many more people being independent representatives at work means people who will need support. And if trade unions come along and say, we can help you, we can advise you on how to get the right information, on consultation. At the moment, the threshold for independent representation is the same as the threshold for trade union recognition. It's very high. This provides a kind of a baby step for people to get that representation. Then they might think about whether or not they'd like to involve trade unions. And actually, throughout the report, I talk about the role that trade unions can make to good employee relations, and it's something that I heard when we were on the road. Kamal.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Kamal Ahmed from the BBC. Prime Minister, could I just ask you a question about implementation? You referred to your lack of a majority in Parliament. Isn't the problem with reports like this, that you can't frankly give any guarantees that you will be able to pass a report like this and the recommendations that it's had through Parliament, and that actually the fear will be for people watching this and watching this glamorous launch is that this will be just another government report gathering dust on the shelves of some long-forgotten Whitehall department. So there's an implementation issue which you have a problem with. And could I just ask you one issue of substance? Matthew Taylor's report says that many gig economy firms should be paying possibly millions of pounds in national insurance contributions, which at present they are not paying. I just wondered if you agreed with that.
Well, on the second point that you made, Kamal, sorry. I was thinking of something else. On the second point that you made, we'll get a look at all these recommendations that have come out of the report, and we'll look at them all very carefully and seriously, and we'll respond to the report collectively in due course, so that we can look at the whole package that the reporters, that Matthew and his panel have put forward. On the first point that you raise, I commissioned this report because I felt there was an issue here. There was an issue about a changing economy where the world of work for a lot of people was changing, their experience of the workplace was changing, and we had to ask ourselves the question, had we got the right sort of protections and rights for workers against the background of that changing world of work, and if not, what should we do? And that's why I asked Matthew to look at it, and he's come up with the recommendations, which I say we will look at very seriously. I would hope, as I said in my speech, that people will see across the political world, will see the importance of addressing this as an issue. This isn't just a sort of here and now. It's actually about the future of our economy. It's about making sure that we have got the right frameworks in place, the right approach in place as well, coming back to Neil's question about it's not just about legislation, to ensure that we can embrace the innovative ways of working of the future, ensure people are prepared and skilled up to take those new jobs, and able to do that in the confidence to know that they will have security and that they will be in good work and that they will be able to progress in that work. So there's a huge challenge in this issue for government and for our economy for the future. I believe for future generations we need to get it right. As Matthew said, it's those who are here from the RSA school who will hopefully benefit in due course from changes that take place to ensure that we're able to provide that secure and good quality work for the future.
I would just add that as an old hand in the public policy world, I've come to understand that policy is much more likely to work if it has public support. And so as part of this process, and with the support of the RSA, we have run a campaign around the idea of good work. And it's very clear to me that whilst people might disagree with certain details of this report, the idea that everybody should have access to good work is one that does command widespread public support. So I hope that people can concentrate on that goal of good work for all, even if we have disagreements about the means that we pursue. So I'm tempted to say you've been a great audience. I'm here all week. I have said it. But we've run out of time. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much, Prime Minister, for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.